This is Carolina Ghost Towns, a podcast about the vanished towns and lost communities in South Carolina, North Carolina, and maybe a few other places. I'm your host, Tom Taylor. Riot, massacre, uprising, oppression, rebellion, revolution, treason, traitor, patriot. Those are all loaded terms, especially in today's political climate. Their true meaning depends on the context and perspective of the persons using them. One group's revolution is another's rebellion, which needs to be suppressed. One group's protest is another's riot. Sometimes the meaning is unequivocal. A massacre can be just that. But sometimes the root causes of violence like this are unknown, and there are much more nuanced forces at play. In 1891, former Missouri Senator George Graham Vest, who had supported the Confederacy, gave a speech in which he said,
"In all revolutions, the vanquished are the ones who are guilty of treason, even by the historians. For history is written by the victors and framed according to the prejudices and bias existing on their side."
That phrase was later attributed to Winston Churchill and paraphrased as, "History is written by the winners." Today's ghost town was defined by one specific event. The newspapers of the time described it as a riot by one side. But that simple description falls far short of what actually happened. The town of Phoenix in Greenwood County, South Carolina, did not rise from the ashes like its mythical namesake. Nothing but the name remains. However, the Phoenix riot of 1898 lives on in memory. Like so many of the ghost towns I've found, this one popped up on an old map. Phoenix appears on the 1894 Greer Township map of Abbeville County. This section later became part of the new county of Greenwood. The origins of the Phoenix community are rather murky. I can't find a source for the name. The town doesn't show up on the Mills 1825 atlas, but it does appear on the 1894 map, right on the boundary between Abbeville and Edgefield districts. I found several references in old newspapers for Phoenix in Edgefield district dating back to 1837. I wasn't sure if this was the same community or not. Both Edgefield and Abbeville were in existence in 1837, so this early Phoenix doesn't seem to be a case of moving county borders to create a new county, as with Greenwood. I found a reference to Phoenix Edgefield District from 1842 in a letter to the editor from Thomas Lake. In that letter, published in the Charleston Daily Courier, Lake stated that he was dissolving a mercantile business partnership. The general mercantile in the Phoenix and Abbeville was the Watson and Lake General Store. I suspect that since the community was right on the boundary, both districts claimed the community. Regardless, it looks like Thomas Lake set up a new mercantile in Abbeville district. The community that had become the home for his new store once had the grandiose name of New Boston. But I haven't been able to find any additional information on that name or when and why it was changed to Phoenix. By 1875, there were 2 stores in the community, according to a Dunn and Bradstreet report. By 1885, James Callison moved his store to another nearby community and founded the town of Callison, which also became a ghost town in Greenwood County. By 1878, Johnson S. Watson had become the postmaster of Phoenix and proprietor of the Watson and Lake Mercantile, now the only store in Phoenix. This was truly just an isolated farming community and never really a town. In addition to the store and post office, there were 2 churches, Rehoboth Methodist Church and Damascus Baptist Church. In the late 1800s, the Phoenix School provided education for the community. The community was located at a crossroads, and it was never served by a railroad. That isolation didn't prevent it from becoming a center of conflict, though. The so-called Phoenix riots of 1898 took place within the context of post-Reconstruction and the beginnings of the Jim Crow era, and involved one of the most prominent families in the district. The Talbert family was one of the largest landowners in the area, and they were somewhat of an anomaly. The Talberts had been slave owners until the Emancipation Proclamation, and had even served in the Confederate Army. However, after the Civil War, they voted for the Republican candidate Grant for president, and became heavily involved with that political party. Despite their previous alignments, the Talberts supported voting rights for the newly freed slaves. The Democratic Party, headed by Pitchfork Ben Tillman, was doing everything possible to disenfranchise black voters and establish segregationist Jim Crow laws. The South Carolina Constitution of 1895 codified new voting regulations with rules for literacy and land ownership that would deny voting rights for most blacks. In 1898, Robert Reed Talbert ran as a Republican for the representative of the 3rd Congressional District against Democrat A.C. Latimer. On Election Day, Red Talbert's brother, Thomas Payne Talbert, arrived at the Watson and Lake Mercantile to collect affidavits from blacks who were being denied the right to vote. The affidavit read in part as follows.
This certifies that the undersigned, being over the age of 21, male resident of the votive precinct, blank of ward, blank, and legally qualified to register and vote therein, did, on this the 8th day of November, 1898, present himself at the said voting precinct to vote for R.R. Tolbert, the Republican candidate for Congress in the 3rd District of said state. Desiring and intending to vote for the said R.R. Tolbert, and upon his attempting to vote was denied the right to so vote, and his vote thus offered to proper officers was rejected.
Tom Talbert collected his affidavits in a ballot box in the upstairs room of the store where the election was held. He was forced to move his activities from that location, but the store proprietor, John Watson, was a relative of the Talberts. Watson allowed Talbert to continue collecting affidavits on the front porch of the store. The local Democrat chair, J.I. Bose Etheridge, and Robert Cheatham and a group of followers accosted Talbert and turned over his ballot box. A fight ensued, with Etheridge and Cheatham hitting Talbert with sticks. Talbert purportedly hit Etheridge over the head with a wagon axle. Someone fired a shotgun, hitting Etheridge in the forehead, killing him. That caused a general melee between the Democrats and Talbert supporters, with multiple shots fired. Talbert was hit by gunfire as many as 20 times, but somehow survived. Badly wounded, he was taken to a nearby relative's home. Robert Cheatham and a group of armed white men began rounding up black men and also began to search for Thomas Talbert. The evening of the riot, Talbert was located, but was left alone as it was thought that he was near death anyway. The next day, several black men who were thought to be participants in the riot were taken to Rehoboth Methodist Church, where they were shot and killed. In the days that followed, there was more violence against the black population of the community, and against the Talberts in particular. Talbert properties, as well as the property of random black residents, were destroyed and burned. The newspapers of the time laid the blame for the riot squarely at the feet of the Talbert family. One report went so far as to say that the Talberts had hidden weapons for the black residents in the tall grass next to the Phoenix School in preparation for the election riots. The Talberts were driven out of the region. Wyatt Aiken wrote out warrants for the Talberts' arrests. On November 14th, Red Talbert actually traveled to the White House and spoke to President William McKinley about the riots. McKinley declined to offer any federal aid to secure the peace. Joseph Talbert was removed as postmaster of the McCormick Post Office, and John Talbert and his son Joe fled to Columbia, where they were arrested. Ultimately, no one was held accountable for the violence by the courts. The Talberts were never tried, and those arrested were released. None of the white riot participants were ever accused or arrested. The only justice to be had was the vigilante justice of the mobs with their lynchings. It's also important to note that those rioting were always considered to be the disenfranchised blacks, led by the Talberts, never the white vigilante mob. Thomas Payne Talbert survived his injuries, but was permanently scarred by the events of 1898, both physically and mentally. He had witnessed the homes of his family torched by the mobs. In 1904, another Talbert house was burned, so he decided to build a fireproof home, one that could not be so easily torched. The result was the Rock House, constructed entirely of stone, concrete, glass, and steel, and built on his farmland not far from the Phoenix community. Tom Talbert never lived in the Rock House. He lived in a detached kitchen and stored family heirlooms in the house. Thomas Payne Talbert died in 1940 after getting sick from drinking bad eggnog with whiskey. A young Benjamin Mays lived nearby in Epworth community and was witness to the immediate aftermath of the riot. In his 1971 autobiography, Mays wrote the following.
I remember a crowd of white men who rode up on horseback with rifles on their shoulders. I was with my father when they rode up, and I remember starting to cry. They cursed my father, drew their guns, and made him salute, made him take off his hat and bow down to them several times. Then they rode away. I was not yet 5 years old, but I have never forgotten them. That mob is my earliest memory. After the Phoenix riot, never a year passed in my county that there were not several brutal incidents involving Negroes and whites. In the months following the Phoenix riot, I had seen bloodhounds on our land with a mob looking for a Negro. I saw a Negro hiding in the swamps for fear of being caught and lynched. Negroes got the worst of it. Guilt and innocence were meaningless words. The Negro was always blamed, always punished.
Those early impressions stayed with Mays through his later career as a minister and as an educator. Mays studied at Bates College in Lewiston, Maine, then completed his master's and doctorate at the University of Chicago. Dr. Benjamin Mays taught at Howard University and in 1940 was named president of Morehouse College in Atlanta. It was during his Morehouse years that Mays taught a young Martin Luther King Jr., also met with Gandhi, and even consulted with Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. After his tenure at Morehouse College, Mays continued to promote civil rights, working with President Jimmy Carter. Benjamin Mays died in 1984. There's very little left of the once thriving farming community of Phoenix. There are farms and houses, but no indication of commerce. The intersection of Phoenix Road and Katy Hill Road is the most likely spot for the center of the community and the Watson and Lake store. Several roads come together at that point, making it a natural place for gathering. The Phoenix School is about 100 yards from the intersection and still serves the area as a community center. Nearby Rehoboth Methodist Church, site of the infamous lynchings, is to the west of Phoenix and is still home to an active congregation. Members of the Talbert family are buried in the cemetery. First Damascus Baptist Church sits to the east of the community and is the burial place of Bose Etheridge. A tall obelisk marks his grave with the inscription, "He died for his country." Second Damascus Baptist Church is just around the corner from First Damascus. This African-American congregation was established when the recently freed slaves refused to sit in the slave gallery of the original Damascus Church after the Civil War. Tom Talbert's Rock House sits abandoned several miles from Phoenix. Supposedly haunted, it has never been occupied and is now covered in graffiti. Until 2023, the house was owned by the descendants of the Talbert family. It was recently purchased by Heath Davis, who hopes to restore the Rock House as a historic site. The city of Greenwood is to the northwest of Phoenix. There, you can find the Benjamin Mays Historic Site, which is well worth a visit. There's also a city park named Phoenix, as well as an apartment complex with that name. That does it for this episode. Be sure to check the show notes for links to the resources I used and to see images of the Watson and Lake store. As always, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share the show with others. Thank you.
In this southern ghost town, we found a story untold. In the shadows of the past, we unravel, secrets unfold. With each step we take, we journey back in time. In this southern ghost town, we leave our footprints behind.
Thanks for listening. The opening music was composed by Lex FM with additional music from Pixabay. The song Southern Ghost Town was generated by Suno AI. All other music was composed and recorded by me, Tom Taylor. Carolina Ghost Towns is a part of the Random Connections empire. It's pretty much a one-man show, so I wear all the hats, including producer, writer, researcher, sound engineer, publicist, and bartender. If you like the show, please subscribe on your favorite pod venue and be sure to give us feedback. If you have questions, comments, or ideas for the show, you can reach me at carolinaghosttownspod@gmail.com. For more information and show notes, visit randomconnections.com. Thank you.
In this southern ghost town, we found a story untold. In the shadows of the past, we unravel, secrets unfold. With each step we take, we journey back in time. In this southern ghost town, we leave our footprints behind.